Welcome back to the Two Promises Podcast. Let's dive right into another exciting adventure with BD and crew as he pursues his new passion of one day finding the most epic bourbon. The Two Promises team send their special thanks to Hobie and the Huckleberries for their masterful theme music. So grab a glass, relax, and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth whiskey. No more wine. I like straight bourbon. Baby, you try the ride.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back. Thank you all very much for joining me, and thank you all for your patience. I know that it's been a long time since I have dropped an official podcast episode, but don't fret, I have returned, and I am excited to be back. There is a chance that some of you might have been following my journey in other ways throughout my direct connections in personal life, or however else that you might have been showing support or interest. Either way, I want to thank you very much for all that you've done supporting me, whether that was just following along, sending me a sign, sending me a signal, helping out with some lights, whatever that might be, a good conversation, somebody allowing me a place to vent. I do want to say thank you all very, very much, and I am very grateful to be back and in a lot healthier state. And that's the purpose of today's podcast, really, is to kind of reconnect with the followers of the podcast specifically who might not have been tuned in to me in any other way or medium. And essentially, I really needed to take a pause and focus on getting my health back in order. As I told you all in previous episodes, that I did have a goal of trying to put the oxygen mask on my neighbor while I put it on myself as well, and I learned from painful personal experience that that is not the best way to do it. I had gone through a full career, 7+ deployments as a special operations medic, and I was quite successful, and all of those wins kind of gave me a slightly overconfident stance on my ability to treat myself while also taking care of others. I also found myself up against years and years and years of physical and mental injuries that had occurred and that were very lightly treated, if at all. And whenever I was faced with the full weight of everything that was going on, it was clear that I was unable to get through it alone, and I needed help of a professional medical team. During my attempt to get care, as many of you know from some of the earlier episodes, my insurance was illegally and unjustly denied, and it took me a very, very long time, 2 years, realistically, to get into a clinic that was actually able to and wanting to give me treatment for the conditions that I had and that I needed treatment for. Some of these therapies were quite quick and gave very dramatic results in my health. For instance, I had benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. That is vertigo that is brought on by a physical condition. Inside your ears, there is a plate, and on that plate are a series of small rock-like objects, marbles, if you will. You've heard of people losing their marbles, so this is kind of a interesting tie-in to that phrase. At some point in my life, my career, those stones, otoliths they're called, got displaced. And there's some canals that are tubes. So think about like some pipes that are kind of brought up above that plate of stones, and sometimes they're on the sides, and they're basically like a pipe, a tunnel. And sometimes the little otoliths can get knocked out of place, and they find themselves in one of those archways. This causes a lot of different issues. The most obvious one is bouts of vertigo from being in different positions, moving your head too quickly, moving your head in the wrong direction, standing up, sitting up, getting out of bed. For me, even if I were to just roll over in bed, I would get extremely strong vertigo, even in a completely dark room. Getting up out of bed triggered it frequently as well, and movements throughout the day. 2 15-minute physical therapy sessions were able to get these stones back in place, and the effects were almost immediate. I was turning my heads walking down a hallway. They noticed that at the clinic, and various other things. Not just the vertigo, which can be crippling and cause you to feel very disabled going through your daily life, but it also creates a significant drain on your energy levels. For instance, think about your cell phone. Whenever you go into an area where you do not have cell service, there's no satellite connection, no towers to ping off of, it's constantly searching, sending out its own outbound signals to try to find it and connect off of it. That consistent use of that mechanism, trying to find the appropriate connection, satellite, tower, whatever it's pinging off of, causes a significant drain on the battery. So if you're not careful, if you find yourself without signal, you will also notice that you're draining the physical battery within the phone quicker than it would under normal operations. This has an effect on the brain as well. So your brain is constantly trying to check in with 3 major systems to figure out where it is oriented in place and time and space. One of those systems, the most obvious, is your vision. You can see where you're at in a room. You can see if you're setting up, standing up, laying down, turning your head, where you're at in the room. The visual stimuli is decoded by the brain, and it gives your mind, your brain, an ability to understand where you're at, where you stand. Another system that's important for orientation and of the body is your proprioceptors. Your proprioceptors are very specialized receptor cells or sites that usually they are in your joints, and what those do is they can help reference where your arms are at, if you're pointing, if you're how your body is positioned. So you can close your eyes, you can lift your hand, and you can know that your hand is up because your proprioceptors are giving your brain feedback, letting them know where it's at. You can put your arm to the side like a cross. You can bring your finger articulating at the elbow, and you can touch your nose, even with your eyes closed. Your proprioceptors are important cells that relay that information to your brain to enable you to do these things, even with your eyes closed. Finally, you have the vestibular system. The vestibular system is what we talked about at the very beginning. It is the vestibule of your ear, and it is comprised of the anatomical parts that we mentioned earlier. The plate, the otoliths, the semicircular canals, and that system also sends information to the brain, much like the cell phone. And as the brain and it communicate back and forth, if it checks in and it says, oh yeah, everything's fine, no big deal, all right, cool, good check, good check. However, if there's something awry, like those stones are out of place, they're sending mixed up signal. It's very safe. We'll just use the word staticky or broken or modulated. So the brain is, from all these little nerve cells, is realizing something's amiss, something's out of place. So it's checking in, saying, hey, is everything good? Is everything good? And that constant back and forth messaging creates a further drain on one's energy levels. There were a lot of other issues that I was fighting through. That was just one example, and a basic fix that could have been done. Even physicians' assistants are taught these therapies to recognize and to treat benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. So it is very frustrating that it took 2 years and a series of essentially legal battles just to get access to that clinic. And really, it was a charity that allowed me to get to that clinic, and it had nothing to do with my insurance coverages at the time. They were not responding to my requests for care, especially to be seen out in the community. Community care is the program through the VA that I'm discussing specifically. I had deeply troubled sleep for various reasons. It was tormenting. Nights were awful. And as a result, all of these factors combined pulled out of me some of the worst expressions that I've ever had. I had a temporary personality change, if you will, because I was cranky, I was angry, I was projecting a lot of that hurt, and I was also resentful of the position that I was in. I did not feel like I deserved it, and I negatively projected that outward. One thing that they really put into your brain, and that as a result of my my mental fatigue and my body breaking down and my mind breaking down and a lot of other factors, I lost touch with that training and wisdom. But it is basically to bring that positive mental attitude, to not identify with a victim mentality, to fight through it. And I did fight through it, but I also expressed myself in some of the worst ways that I have. I was very angry. I was on a hair trigger I was unable to control my emotions. I was unable to control angry outbursts. I even would just cry randomly. So even the other side of the emotional spectrum, I had zero control of it. I would be walking through the grocery aisle and just the waterworks would turn on. I would just tears would just start pouring from my eyes through the through the beard, and people would look at me like I was a feral animal. And in many ways I was driven into the limbic system, the animalistic side of our nervous system and our human experience, that if people are not careful, they can easily find themselves trapped in. And that is something that I lived through. I saw it for myself firsthand. So with that decreased executive functioning, the chronic pain, my inability to control my emotions, and generally not being in good health, that was one contributing factor for me not keeping up with the podcast. I wanted to make sure that I was expressing myself well whenever I was engaging with my great fans and my audience. And at the same time, I felt like there were many people who were still following me, supporting me in one way or the other outside of this platform, the Two Promises podcast. So I really didn't think that I was abandoning my wonderful community during this time. I felt I was just isolating my engagement with them to the other means that were available. However, I am very thankful to be healthier again and to be able to get back to recording and engaging with the audience in a different way. So just a kind of cliff notes of some of the things that were going on outside of the ones that I described in a little bit more detail, but I did require 2 surgeries, and I might require some more in the future, but currently setting at 2, we've been able to get a lot of the things taken care of that were causing the most serious issues. I also had over a 2-week intensive outpatient program where I was at a clinic full-time, all day, like a full work day, was in different therapies, different modalities, and developing the skills and techniques necessary to deal with some of my chronic lifelong issues. Each week had multiple medical appointments or therapies, and I had several months of physical therapy as well. Maybe we'll get into some more of these things. I know we will get into some more of these things in individual episodes, but I could not lay on my left side. I could not sleep on my left side. The pain would become 10 out of 10 and radiate from my sternum to my spine. It was crazy, and I couldn't figure out why or how. And again, being able to finally be treated by the medical professionals really opened up those doors to healing and recovery. Essentially, at some point, my spine stopped returning to alignment when I laid down. Somewhere over time, I took a hit to the ribs or something, and it locked up those muscles. And those muscles wouldn't relax enough to allow my spine to go into alignment. So we had to do 3 or 4 months of physical therapy to work through those muscles and get them back to be able to relax, so that just a few vertebrae within my spine were then able to fall back into the proper placement whenever I laid down. And being able to sleep on the left side is huge for other reasons. One other reason is I also have a hiatal hernia, and that causes a significant heartburn or acid reflux, and laying on your left side is the preferable side to prevent that sphincter from opening up whenever you're laying down. So even on the right side, the acid reflux and heartburn would become sleep disturbances, let alone any of the other things that were going on. So much of my focus was devoted to ensuring that my access to healthcare continued, that I was getting the treatment that I needed, and that I was not getting taken advantage of by the system or by maligned providers who might not have a good set of ethics and moral compass. This also showed me the dark side of the healthcare industry. I was a special operations combat medic. I was trained by some of the best medical providers in the world. I've been able to go to plenty of continuing education sessions with doctors and other experts at the very top of their field, and the Hippocratic Oath and take patient care, good quality patient care, was really driven into us, and it was really amazing. I have to give some big props to the Army the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center, their medical training center, JSOMTC, does an incredible job with building good medics. I got some other licenses outside of my military credentials. I've operated as a paramedic for at least a decade in the civilian world, overseas, and the patient's well-being has always been at the forefront of my mind. So it was a considerable disillusionment and mind bend to see the prevalence of mental health care providers and other health care providers who were self-interested and would go to extremes to deny the health care that their patients need and give them substandard care and treatment. So with benefits such as that being illegally and justly denied, whenever I went into my medical health crisis, or episode, as my friends like to call it, it put me into that deep dive of the tragic state of affairs that the healthcare system in the United States is in, with some very severe symptoms of operator syndrome or some complex PTS symptoms. It was very unexpected that I would not be able to be given the care that I had paid for, that I paid into my own insurance policies for, and that would be expected of a service member at 15 years with 7 deployments. So this also had an impact on my mental well-being, and it derailed my plans for a bit, having to put every scrap of energy into bringing myself back, because for 2 years it was really just me doing what I knew to do from previous experience with the patient population that is often encountering some of these debilitating disorders, post-traumatic stress, depression, chronic pain, nervous system issues, limbic system, right? And then once I did start finally getting care, I was also walking a very balanced line of trying to make sure that I was getting the treatment I needed and that it was appropriately documented so that I could salvage my career. I really did expect to be able to continue my naval service and my naval career. There were plenty of entities out there that were wanting to bring me on full-time active duty orders, even at the very beginning of my episode, if you will, at the beginning of my crisis. And because of some actions of malign individuals, those opportunities were taken from me from the get-go as well. They did write some very great letters of support to attempt to keep me back on track, to keep me back with the Navy, and allow me to continue my reserve service. And I was close to putting in an officer package as I was completing my bachelor's degree. Ultimately, the final formal board for my line of duty and my medical issues with the Navy, the individuals who would not even put their names on the document, did not even sign their names. They digitally signed, but you could not see who it was that made the decision. They told me that they were not considering any of the evidence that I was submitting, which included a PsyD, which is the top clinical diagnostic psychiatric providers. There is no one above them. They are at the top. I had letters from them. I had letters from my ongoing mental health therapist who had worked with me for over 6 months, and as DSM, they should have been the most heavily weighted piece of evidence. That was not considered by the board, and I'm wanting to say 8 or 9 letters of support from active duty members saying that they would still work with me, all SEALs I deployed with, or other Navy people that I deployed with who'd seen me and known me for over a decade. None of those were considered by the board. They said they were not considering those. They were only going to consider 2 other documents from 2 people who had never met me in person, and the extent of their engagements with me were less than an hour and a half. So, those are some of the realities of working with the Navy, the military, large government organizations. There are considerable inefficiencies and rooms for human error and human malicious actions. So be aware, keep your head on a swivel, protect yourself, advocate for yourself. So that is a bit of my update. It was a little long-winded. I didn't intend to get into that much detail, but I did want to keep my listeners informed of what was going on in my life and reasons for having to direct my focus and energy into other areas for a time being. You are not abandoned. If anything, it is these experiences and the frustrations and the mess-ups, and then also me going into some of the very darkest places, getting pushed so deeply into that animalistic nature that humans have, that I know now I am much better equipped to help guide people out of it. People who have been into a dark place, or who are in high profile careers, high risk careers for these types of trauma injuries. Please know that there is hope, that there is a way through, and I believe I am much better equipped to shine a light on at least the path that helped get me through it. And it was a winding road. I used different techniques and different skills throughout different parts of it, and all of them all work together to help me. So I have been able to utilize a wide variety of tools and techniques, and I am going to be sharing them with all of you throughout various episodes. Not every episode's going to be heavy on the trauma or anything like that. As you know, I like to have fun. I like to laugh. I like to tell funny stories. I like to, joke around with guests. So there's going to be plenty of that, but there's also going to be plenty of practical tips, techniques to help someone who might be going through a dark time and get them back on their feet. With that, I will bid you adieu for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very grateful for all of your support, whether it's putting on a light, flashing me a smile, waving, high five, anything that you've done to show your support or interest, just following along and watching, even if you're watching from a distance, and I never know that you've been paying attention. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being there for me, and thank you for your support. I look forward to engaging more with you all as we go down this incredible journey.
Thank you for joining us today on this curious roller coaster of life. If this is your stop, please exit peacefully. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you're ready for another one, just push play. Just a final note before you go, thank you, and thank you for feeling. The distillation and aging process is different for everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're ready for. Sip slowly and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth whiskey. No more wine.